All right, we are live. So I wanted to take a minute and check in via chat, see who's available to hang out, and see if there's any questions, thoughts, or whatnot about Colombia. And so as we wait, looks like there's one person tuning in thus far. But today, I had a chance to speak with another real estate person, as well as I stopped and spoke with a young lady on the corner, a Venezuelan, to get more of her take. So I'm interviewing everybody. So with that being the case, I want to check in, see who's available, see who wants to chit chat back and forth a little bit. And, there were some questions in the comment section of the videos that I haven't been able to answer. Okay. But hopefully today people can ask those questions directly to us or you or whatever. And so far we got Spirit King, we got Krispy Kreme, we got Excalibur. So I appreciate everybody taking time to hang out with us. And I can go from there, but we got Excalibur says, let's go. We got Adius now. So with that being the case, too much audio. All right, so with that being the case, I want to share some of my thoughts on my experiences thus far in Medellin, and then also, because Mr. George lives here, it'd be a lot easier to get any serious questions.
I spend a lot of time here.
Yeah.
I don't like to say I live anywhere. I just kind of go with the flow, but I like to spend a lot of time here for sure.
Yeah, that's good, man. Let me move this up so we get more center here. Okay, so with that being the case, here's an interesting question from Mr. Jeff. It says, can U.S. citizens buy property in Colombia, no strings attached?
Yes.
Yes.
Easy question.
Easy question. So if you want a little bit more specific answer, go a little deeper.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to just give you a real short answer, but yes, they absolutely can. The property rights here, I think, are actually a little bit stronger even in the United States, because in the US, you always have a lien against your property in the form of property taxes. So even if you think you own your property outright, you really don't, because the government just try not paying your property taxes for a couple years. And here, although they do have property taxes, the laws aren't nearly as draconian if you don't keep up on those payments. So it's a very similar process. Here, we've got a notary and you use a lawyer instead of using a title company. Mm-hmm. But it takes about the same amount of, actually it's a little faster here. If you've got a counterparty that's really ready to go, you can get it done faster here. The commissions are, and the fees are pretty much the same. So very similar process to the US.
Yeah. So someone says, unlike in Mexico, or Jeff said, unlike in Mexico.
Yeah, because there's a 99-year lease. So you really can't own the property. Yeah. You just get a 99-year lease on it.
A couple generations worth.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of homework on that, so I'm not too familiar with how that works. Mm-hmm. Because typically, well, not typically, all the time, when I've looked at real estate across the world, that's kind of one of my first things that I look for, is to make sure that you can own the property outright.
Good stuff there. So as always, if you guys have anything you want to share with us, also, might as well, because I haven't been staying in touch much with the mainstream news, apart from just being in Medellin, and unless you go looking for it, you're not going to necessarily find it. I haven't attempted to cut on any type of TV to watch no news here, so I don't know what's going on here.
I like to ignore it. So,
you ignore it?
Yeah, it's not that I don't watch it. I completely ignore it.
That's real. Keep yourself from panicking a lot. So Jeff says, how much is property taxes? 1%?
Yeah, about 1%.
1%. Good stuff. What else we got here? So Mia says hello. So in talking with Ryan, he mentioned about for U.S. citizens staying here longer than 180 days, there's a certain tier level tax system, whatever. Can you elaborate on that more, if you don't mind?
Yeah, you just become a tax resident of Colombia. So it doesn't mean that you pay any additional taxes. You just have to, you would if the tax rate in Colombia was higher than the tax rate in the United States, but I don't think it is. Yeah. In fact, with capital gains, it's a little lower. It's only 10%, long-term cap gains. But so how that works is, if you're a tax resident, and this is with most countries, if you're a tax resident of that country, you're there more than half the year, then you pay your taxes to that country first. This is income taxes or cap gains. And then you would take that and use that as a credit against the taxes that you owe in the United States. Yeah. So that's why if your tax rate here is, let's say 30%, and in the US it's 35%, well, you pay the taxes here first, and then you get a credit, and you pay an additional 5% in the U.S. The only place where U.S. citizens legally do not pay U.S. taxes is if they're a resident of Puerto Rico. So you'd have to look into it, which I went through that process in 2014. It's Act 20 and 22, which is what you can look up if you're kind of looking for ways to lower your tax burden as a U.S. citizen.
Sweet. Puerto Rico. So I know a lot of people in the crypto space is very excited about the new laws and things that put in place for digital nomads, aka crypto people. So
yeah, that they're referring to Act 2022.
Act 2022. Good deal. All right, so here's a question from Spirit King. He says, is it safe to store gold and silver in Colombia? From theft to government stability, what are the risks?
Well, I think the risks of storing gold here in your back pocket are just the same as the United States. I don't think there's an increase of risk here. I'd go even further. I'd say it's probably a little lower here. It depends on where you live. You know, if you have like if you're in a super secure high-rise building in the United States it's got a lot of security coming to the front door. I actually lived in a place I recall in Phoenix. It was right by the Biltmore. And first of all, you had to go through the doorman. Then you had to go through the security guard. Then once you got on the elevator, you had to put your thumbprint on the elevator, and it would only go to your floor. That's it. So if you're living in a place like that, I think you're pretty good if you're just keeping it in a safe in your house or something like that. But I don't think there's any greater or less risk here.
Yeah. Someone says, can I become a citizen in Colombia?
Yes, you can. You can do dual citizenship. So with the U.S., and I suggest that I'm on that path myself. I had Sebastian, who's my assistant, get an investment visa. And so he got me an investment visa. And then it's either 3 years or 5 years. I'm not sure which, but then I'll have the opportunity to apply for citizenship and get an actual second passport.
Sweet. Nice. Dual citizenship I think dual citizenship, a lot of people I've interviewed, Leo Gantz and even with Doug Casey, talking about, everyone mentioned about get out, start working your citizenship, try to get a second passport, whatever. And Jeff Burrick specializes in places and countries where it's the easiest. Of course, the more you can contribute to that country, the faster and the easier the process will be. So that's something worth looking into. But not everyone will be able to do that. So
yeah, that's right. Even just for the average Joe, what I suggest doing is just next time you got a 2-week vacation, take a week and go to a country that you think you might like to spend time if you didn't like what was going on in the United States or whatever your home country is. And then when you're there, maybe try to set up a bank account, go back home, and just take baby steps. I don't think, people see it as like a binary decision. Either you do everything in the United States or you do everything outside. If you can't do everything outside, well, then just forget it. I'm not even going to think about it. But, just take it. Do a week, set up a bank account, put a couple grand down there, just kind of get a feel for how it works. And then if in maybe next year's vacation, go back down, maybe look at some property and just kind of take it as a gradual progression.
Start sowing some seeds there early.
Yeah, for sure.
Bank account. Okay. Sure. Interesting. So here, Ernesto from Puerto Rico says, hi guys, I'm from Puerto Rico. Actually, a quake 5.3 just hit us. It's shaking a lot here. That's unfortunate.
Oh, that's nothing. That happens all the time in
Puerto Rico.
Ernesto, by the way, I lived, I was in San Juan, of course. I had a place at Isla Verde, right by the El San Juan Hotel, that old school casino hotel. Really, really neat place. I enjoyed spending time there. Yeah.
Nice. It says Colombia, not Colombia. Colombia. Okay. Keep it going. It says, thanks, my friend. We're not used to quakes here, but people is aware. Okay. Sounds good. Interesting. So the Venezuela situation. So as I mentioned earlier, Venezuela being so close to this country, I was telling Ryan earlier, one of my concerns will be if things aren't solved there, or if there's no solution to that problem, then I can imagine more Venezuelans coming to Colombia to the point where they're going to have to close the borders or figure out some type of way where it doesn't impact their economy a lot. And so do you foresee something of that nature happening? Possibly. Because I mean, a lot of people are a lot of people are benefiting as far as creating jobs for Venezuelans and whatnot. So there's opportunity for people to get into the economy here. But then again, outside, there's so many people that's not in the main economy, but they are in the form of begging. But that's more of a burden on the country, I think. So
yeah, I don't know that it could get much worse. So if you look at the Venezuela situation, and what could they do to make it worse? So I think that, and since it's been going on so long, you know, if it was something that had been going on for like 2 weeks or a couple months, I would see there could possibly be a lot more inflow.
Yeah.
But it's been going on for 5-6 years. So it's been getting progressively worse. But over the last 2 years, I mean, it's just been a living hell there. So I think all the people that are going to leave the country probably have already left. I don't know how much worse it could get, but I don't think it's a huge burden. Yeah, I don't know on the economy if it's a big burden, because I don't know how their social welfare system works. It was like the United States where, yeah, it could potentially be really have some downside there.
Yeah.
But I would assume that it doesn't really work that way here. So it's very unfortunate. I'm glad that they can come over and just get some reprieve from the nightmare that they have to deal with over there. I mean, I've got a lot of fantastic Venezuelan people working for me, and it's great that they've got some release valve.
Yeah, that's good. So there's a question for Ernesto. He says, I have a question. Here in Puerto Rico, we do not have to pay for capital gains, but it's necessary to let the government know.
Yeah.
But is it necessary to let the government know?
Yeah, you're always going to have to file U.S. taxes. Well, actually, I take that back. I don't want to say yes or no there because I don't know the answer. You want to check with a CPA, and not just a CPA, but one that really understands what's going on in Puerto Rico. Very few of them do. But the bottom line is for specific cap gains, they're at zero, and your max on business revenue, certain business revenues, there's stipulations that has to be Puerto Rican sourced and whatnot, but that maxes out at 4%.
Yeah, sounds good. And so, what else is going on? So, okay, so one thing that I talked about yesterday was the Wuhan virus. And so it's gonna be interesting to see how this plays out in the next couple of weeks, months, whatever. And will there be many cases down in this region? As far as like, I think I can go conspiratorial, I don't mind. But yeah, thinking it's a strategically placed or strategically, I'm losing my train of thought. Virus put in certain places that are involved in all the current economic issues we're having. So France has had a case, US has a couple cases, China has some cases. So it might end up being a virus limited to just the G7 type nations to spur on some type of, as I mentioned last night, about some joint effort to unite, and it'll be easier to get governments to say, okay, they can pass some type of law that say, we want to now join forces as a team. We need that, the one world government type of
it's always for your security.
Right. So so that's what I'm curious to find out. But what are your thoughts on that? Of course, you haven't, I haven't heard nothing about it out here yet. But is that something that concerns you? And is it something that could possibly be strategically done to help cover up or push the can down the road a little bit more as far as debt expansion, things like that?
Well, I think anything is possible. That's for sure. I'm not sure what the probabilities are because I don't get into the weeds on that stuff too much. Mm-hmm. But I would say that if it is like a conspiracy thing, if you go down that path, I would prefer to be in a country that was really off the radar, like Colombia or like Montenegro would be fantastic because there's only 600,000 people in the whole country, and you're very, very isolated. So, and if it's not conspiratorial, then I would also prefer to be in a country like this because you've got a lot fewer people traveling to the epicenter epicenter of where this thing is originating. So, if you lived in Montenegro, how many Montenegrins are traveling over to China or Hong Kong? Probably not too many. So I think there is some upside there, regardless of which, what the catalyst to this is.
All right, so this is just live talk. So I rant. So that's why there's no order. There's nothing to this. So if you guys have questions, feel free to ask. And so I'll start throwing out some questions just because I'll make this like an interview style.
Sure.
And so what was I going to say about Colombia? Some of the real estate properties you showed us, and some people got a chance to see the sneak previews. Some of the comments was spending $130,000, $150,000 for a apartment, and then of course from an investment standpoint, it's the equivalent of a house. But I am not familiar with. But having an apartment as opposed to a house, are there any downsides to that, or because it's in a building? So is there any downsides to that?
I think the downsides are far outweighed by the upside.
Mm-hmm.
And so first and foremost, I think most Americans seeing it, the way that people live in Medellin, and it's not like this in all of Colombia, but Medellin is down in a very steep valley, as Mike knows. Mm-hmm. And it's a very narrow valley. So the only way you can build is up. So 99%, have you seen a house?
I have not. Everything is connected.
So that's my point. So 99% of housing here is in high-rise apartment buildings. So that is just where everyone lives. It's not like the U.S. where you kind of live in an apartment. It's like, it's maybe kind of frowned upon a little bit.
Yeah.
You don't have your own space. It's kind of seen like that. Where here, it's just that's where everyone lives. Same thing in Singapore. But my point is that the downside is going to be you've got HOA dues. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at this from strictly a numbers standpoint, looking at it as a rental property.
Yes, association fees.
Exactly, the admin fees. So, but they're reasonable. I think on this place where we're in right now, this is about 1,700 square feet. This is in the nicest area of town. It's going to be you're not going to have to pay any more than you would for this apartment. I think I maybe pay $150, $200, something like that, based on the conversion. Now, your upside is going to be that you have zero maintenance costs. So I own rental properties in the United States, and I know what can go wrong. You can have a roof go out, you can have a foundation crack that you have to fix. Those are $5,000 problems right there. You can have a hot water, or you can have your HVAC blow out. There's a lot of things. You got your landscaping. If a renter moves out, you've got to spend $1,000 minimum to get the place ready for the next renter. There's a lot of costs involved that you just don't have here. You obviously you're not going to have a roof issue. You're not going to have a foundation issue. The walls, I can't make points. There we go. Like these walls, guys, that just I can't. There you go, pointing. And the ceiling, for that matter. Here, and it's all concrete. It's all concrete and brick. So it's much harder to. You can't punch a hole in the wall in a brick wall like a renter could in a drywall. So because of the fact that you don't have a roof, you don't have all those major issues, and the fact that if you do have a renter in there, they can't really do much damage, and it's all tile floors, and these are polished concrete. So that definitely outweighs the downside of it and the cost of the HOA.
Yeah, and so. Precious metal places. So I did a little research yesterday trying to find something near me, and I only came in Google search from company or any type of reputable companies. There's nothing popped up, and so there's one place about 3 miles away, of which I wasn't. After doing a Google map to see the area, I wouldn't go into that area. So I'm like, that's not a place that it was a rare coin place. But in talking with Ryan, he mentioned that what's really big here is emeralds. And so, of course, gold mining and mining for emeralds is really big here. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that, I didn't know until today, of which I, definitely I want to find out more about. So, it's going to be something worthwhile.
Yeah, the gold is not really that popular in South America, as like it is in Asia or other parts of the world, as far as just being a store of value. Mm-hmm. Here, it's really real estate. People see real estate as in the same way that people in the East see gold.
Yeah. And so and to hit on that further, we're talking about safe haven assets for people in this region is in real estate. And so when you can't trust your currency, you get rid of it into something tangible in the form of real estate because they don't have access primarily to gold and silver the way we do in the States. So that's something that's prevalent probably in every country within this continent, in this region here, that has currency issues. People probably flood right into real estate. So
yeah, that's just your go-to. That's where, and to take it a step further, when I was in Ecuador, when I met Angie and Joaquin, I was in a town of maybe 1,000 people, and there's one main highway that went up and down the coastline, and every 2 miles there'd be a little fishing village.
Yeah,
and they build their little structures, the houses, and literally what they do is every time they earn an additional, call it $5,000, they just add another piece to their house. They just continue to build up another room, another portion. They extend out on their property. They just keep building and building and building. So their house is literally their savings account and 100% of their net worth.
Yeah. So what I've noticed is, like, especially in Argentina, I would always see a lot of buildings with just a steel beams sticking up in anticipation of having or wanting to build something pretty soon.
Well, so that might be a little different. What that usually is, at least it is in Ecuador, and a lot of the gringos would come down and say, "Oh, everything looks unfinished. This looks terrible," but they don't realize the reason they do that is because in Ecuador, if the building isn't finished, you don't have to pay property taxes, or there's a big break on the property taxes. So they just leave their buildings unfinished just to get around the property tax.
It changes up there.
Yeah.
Oh man, best emeralds are out of Colombia. You see, what central banks hold the yuan as reserves? Do you follow much about the governmental policies and the central bank? I know I was trying to see if they were city or in Bogota, but do you follow much about the local economy here? It's from what their debt load is like, the GDP and all the details.
Well, just very broad stroke.
Yeah.
I did that when I first came here, when I first considered investing. Their debt to GDP hovers right around 50%. So they've got a lot of upside as far as their ability to raise rates if they do get a big bout of inflation.
Yeah.
The peso's very, very cheap against the dollar right now. And they've left it that way. They've left rates low. I know when we had a bit of inflation here back in maybe 2016, 17, right? And what you'll notice with these smaller economies is they work a lot more like an Austrian textbook. So what I mean by that is, like, the Austrian guys, if any of you guys watched like Bob Murphy or Tom Woods or any of those guys, the prescription that an Austrian would give you if you said, okay, we're going to raise interest rates, what will happen? Bam, 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 bam. Yeah. In these smaller economies, that happens like immediately. It's like clockwork. So here, as soon as they raise interest rates, the peso, bam, appreciated by 10%, something like that. But they have the room to do that. And so a lot of people say, well, George, are you really worried about the currency going against you here? Not really, because again, I'm in hard assets. So if the currency does go against me, it's most likely going to appreciate. The assets are going to go up because of the hedge against inflation. And if you're not living in the United States, your expenses are not denominated in dollars. Right. So it would be the same thing as me saying, Mike, are you worried about what the Turkish lira is doing? Well, no, I could care less. Why? Because your expenses aren't in Turkish lira. They're in dollars. So when you're living in Colombia, you have a much different outlook on it. But as far as the macro stuff, if any of you guys kind of are into economics or Austrian economics, you would like the macro numbers for Colombia a heck of a lot more than you'd like it for the United States.
Hands down.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So at this current moment, the exchange rate is 3,300 to 1 or something like that. And so in my little videos, I try to put the price of everything I spend or buy. And in this area here, as you mentioned, it's more on the upper scale of things. And even with that, it's still very favorable. So I couldn't imagine how much cheaper it would get if I was close to the hills. And
yeah, we're even down to the city. You're in an area right here that's just not even a mile square, maybe a kilometer square, where all the tourists come. So the prices are going to be like double, triple.
Yeah, so they're on the higher end, but still cheaper, like for what you would expect. And so
for sure, right?
It's very favorable.
Yeah, if you just go in very nice areas, by the way. I'm not saying you have to go into the ghetto or anything. If you just go over into Envigado or into Savanetta or some of these little suburbs that are very, very nice. Yeah, I mean the prices are a fraction of what they are even here.
Wow. So I've been getting robbed in on this side. Because everything's been extremely affordable, enjoyably affordable. Like, man, got me thinking a lot. What else we got going on? So if you guys have any questions or thoughts, feel free to ask. We're going for a couple more minutes. I just wanted to connect and check in and get some questions answered if anybody had any. And so here's a good question. Yeah. One thing I have not seen well, in this region here, I haven't seen a lot of Asian presence. So Asia or the Chinese are everywhere, spreading their tentacles in preparation for the New World Order, I believe. And so are they investing heavily here, or have you seen anything? Are they buying up a lot of things or building infrastructure or helping the government out? Or
not so much here, but more so
Bogota. Okay.
And what I've seen with the Chinese, wherever I travel in the world, generally when they're coming in and investing, they go to the capital. So like in Ecuador, I never ever saw them, but you go to Quito, and you see a ton of Chinese. So I think they prefer to hang out in the capitals. Yeah. And Medellin is in the capital of Bogota.
Low blood pressure. What up, guys? Where are the beers? Yeah, that was last evening. Today's the water day, recover day. Oh man.
Yeah, my voice is a little hoarse from screaming so much of the live music. The AC/DC was great.
Yeah. So in the next video coming up, I'll have a couple clips. Can't go too deep into it, but we had a good time hanging out and got a chance to see some good music. Yeah. So talking about SDRs. So let me ask you your thoughts on this. With the push now for central bank digital currencies, do you still see the SDR as it's been described prior to this crypto craze world we're in now still being the same escape route for the world governments, or do you see them merging the SDR or using some type of IMF blockchain, special causing the SDR chain? What do you see, outside of the conventional way the SDR is supposed to be the savior for all the central banks at the end of the day? Do you still see that being the same, or has plans changed based upon all the things you've studied?
I think that's a very good question. I don't see the IMF going away. And therefore, I don't see the SDR going away. But I do see governments going towards a digital currency. It just gives them too much power. It gives them too much control. And I think it's just the bigger a government becomes, the more people who are attracted to power gravitate toward the government. And so it's ironic because the bigger the government gets, the more the people you don't want to be in government are in government. And I think, why would you go into government? I mean, think about what you have to do to be a successful politician. I mean, you have to be morally bankrupt. You have to be fantastic at lying. You have to have no principles. You have to have no ethical North Star. I mean, you just have to be at the dregs of society. And you're a great politician.
Yeah. You'll get reelected more likely.
Yeah. Someone who's honest, like Ron Paul. I mean, although he did well, I think he's definitely an outlier. So my point is that if you have those types of people, these sociopaths in government, and it dawns on them the power they could have to keep their jobs and to leverage the power that they have through a digital currency, I can't see them resisting that. Yeah. And so I think that would allow them to take rates negative, which would, in their minds, that might give them a little bit of a break from being dependent on the SDR, because how do you have a currency crisis when you're forcing everyone to use that currency because they literally have no other option to transact. Even in Venezuela, you can get your money out of the country, you can buy gold or you can buy Bitcoin, or you can do things like that to save yourself. But if there was a digital currency, a government-backed digital currency, a lot of people say to me, not really your type of viewer, but just kind of your normies. Mm-hmm. They say, "Oh, the dollar's already digital. I don't, have cash," and they don't understand that it goes to a whole new level when the government has a tracking code, and they can just block it in an instant, and then they can really guide and direct the demand side of the economy. Mm-hmm. So my point is, like in Venezuela now, you can get your wealth or your purchasing power out of the country. It's hard, but you can do it. With a digital currency, there's absolutely no way. And so they would have the ability to do things that would delay them needing to go to an SDR, but I don't see the SDR. So I don't see the IMF.
Yeah, so Tony says IMF and World Bank goes away with the AIIB, who has 102 countries signed up for the Silk Road. Yeah, so AIIB and the BRICS and all the swap agreements and all that stuff, man, it's being set up, but it's not being talked about in the mainstream. It's well underway. Shanghai Gold Exchange and stuff like that. It's all been set in place. The question will be, at what point will they flip the switch and cut everything on to where China basically makes an announcement about no longer accepting just dollars or whatever, or telling everybody who does business with them, we don't take dollars no more. You see that happening in the next decade, couple of years, or what? Where China says we don't need that no more. We don't want that. Either give us gold or give us this, or we don't want to do business.
I mean, I think the desire of all countries, I think not just China, but the entire world of using dollars is declining rapidly. Mm-hmm. I don't see. I see the dollar having less and less demand. I mean, you got to put yourselves in the position of another country. Would you want to be held hostage by the dollar and having to go through New York for every single one of your transactions so they could just at an instant notice put all these sanctions on you, and then your whole economy's screwed? And no, absolutely not. And the U.S. just bullies their way around the entire world, and they just have taken advantage of not only the fact that they have the reserve currency, but they take advantage of the fact that basically all financial transactions have to go through the U.S. so they can block that. And now with FATCA, it's just at a certain point, it's just human nature. If you keep poking someone, they're going to get pissed, and they're going to say, I don't want any of this anymore. And so the more the U.S. the more the U.S. institutes those types of tactics, I think the less demand you're going to have for the dollar. And the people, they're looking for solutions. I mean, China's looking for a solution. Russia is looking for a solution. And do you blame them? But yeah, I would do the exact same thing.
And to go even further on that, like they've been forced to look for solutions, but yet the sanctions have actually turned to be a blessing, I believe, for a lot of those countries, because all of at least 7 of them, Iran, Venezuela, Russia, China, they've all now developed their own payment systems. Right. They were forced to come up with their own payment systems, which China and Russia, apparently they have their own little interbank exchange and whatnot, and all the dealings there. Iran has a alternative, and France is talking about doing something as well, depending on how this tariff situation pans out. And then, so all those sanctioned nations were forced to speed up the de-dollarization process. Yeah. And so me being able to see that, I realized that the clock is ticking even faster now.
Sure.
Because it looks like to me that they're starting to lose control of their ability to maintain the narrative that everything is fine. Like, I don't anticipate Jerome Powell in the next couple of press conferences coming out with that very optimistic, the economy's good. He's going to be a little bit more dialed back with that, pointing out 1 or 2 issues, perhaps saying that we now have to implement some new tools or something like that. So I don't know, just looking ahead. But the repo market, you've talked a lot about that. You've done a lot of great videos about that. is this the end of? Is this the beginning of the end as far as the Fed controlling the narrative, or will they just QE until hyperinflation time? What do you think?
I think it's the beginning of the end of them having any control whatsoever, because the only thing they really can control, or in the past it's been thought that they control the short end of the yield curve. That means short-term interest rates, like the Fed funds rate, and it kind of trickles down from there. So in the last repo blow-up on the 17th of September, that took the Fed funds rate outside of their target. Most people don't realize that. They think, oh, it's just kind of business as usual. But it was not business as usual, because you had all that capital moving from where it was in the Fed funds, bringing that rate down to where they wanted it. Their target at the time was between, I think, 2 and 2.25 is for that Fed funds rate. And it got up to 2.3 outside of their target range. So that means the Fed officially lost control of the Fed funds rate.
What's the trigger?
The repo. So what happens is you got two markets right there, and it's just like investing.
Okay,
right?
so
if the repo rate goes to 10%,
yeah.
Do you want your money at 2% or 10%? You're going to move all your money to the 10%. That's going to make the rates go up.
Right.
In the Fed funds.
So how much do you think that has to do with? Because that all, to me, I believe it was connected with the fact that the LIBOR exchange mechanism basically was shut off, or came to an end for all banks and whatnot, and everyone's on their own little payment mechanism or interest rate platform of set interest rates. So the SOFR, whatever the SOFR, whatever the acronym is for, kicked in at the same time. So it kicked in officially in August. All the banks will be using that mechanism to discover overnight lending rates. But yet, I think it was some type of malfunction in that process. It's going from the international standard of LIBOR to SOFR, which is best just for U.S. banks. I think that a part of the spike that happened, which caused the repo meltdown, was due to the fact that SOFR makes it harder for the too big to fail banks here to take advantage of the international rates and manipulate things and profit off of the LIBOR like they've been doing for so long. So that's what I think the trigger was initially, which was reflected in the repo markets. But a lot of those funds, are they going to certain banks, or some people say they're finding their way over to Deutsche Bank because of the crisis there? What do you think? So a good chunk of those funds, are they actually going to solve a crisis, or are they going just to provide true liquidity to companies that have issues?
Yeah. So I follow a lot of guys who are really, really smart when it comes to not just repo, but macro in general. I'm sure a lot of your viewers follow guys like Jeff Snyder, like Luke Groman, all the guys on Macro Voices and Real Vision pretty much. And so what I try to do is just take their ideas and process them and understand them to the best of my ability, and then kind of put everything together to come to a conclusion on what I think the most probable reason or outcome will be, because those guys are a hell of a lot smarter than I'll ever be. So that said, Jeff Snyder's take on it is that it's a collateral issue, and the system broke. Now, and I like using Jim Rickard's analogy of, you've got an avalanche. So it's all this snow. What is the exact snowflake that makes it come tumbling down? You don't really know, but it's not just that snowflake that triggered it. It's all the other snow underneath that caused the instability. And I think the repo market is probably the same thing. So going back to Snyder's take, he believes that the whole system broke in 2009 or during the great financial crisis. And he makes it's tough to argue with him, because back before 2009, if you look at a chart of the Fed, the excess reserves in the banking system, and that's the money that could go into repo to bring down the rate. The nightly or the average amount of the excess reserves in the entire U.S. banking system was about $10 billion. If you average it out, $10 billion, right? You know what it went to, and it's peaked out at it goes up with the Fed's balance sheet. It peaked out at like well over $2 trillion, and right now it's about 1.5 trillion. So you think about the money markets that we have, and the ways that businesses get, or entities get dollar funding in this whole system. And you look at the fact that they used to be able to do that with $10 billion, and now they need 1.5 trillion to do that.
Yeah.
And we haven't had that much inflation in the last 10 years. So there is something wildly wrong. So Snyder's take is that before the great financial crisis, a lot of the collateral that they used in those repo transactions was mortgage-backed securities. And other things too that we look at now as just toxic waste. You wouldn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And he thinks that when the crisis hit, all the banks realized, oh, okay, that collateral, we want nothing to do with that. We want zero to do with it. So then it went to a situation where they would only accept U.S. Treasuries. And that was just such a small slice of the collateral pie that the government, even though it's been running just massive deficits, it still hasn't filled the void that was left by the banks and the broker, the primary dealers, and that everyone in that system just really now shunning all the garbage collateral that they used to take. So he thinks that was kind of all the snow that was building to form that avalanche, and that's the problem. And then it takes it a step further when you add the Eurodollar system into it. That takes us down another rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But then you combine that with the fact that there is most likely a counterparty risk issue as well. So I don't think it's just that the entities who are lending into the repo market are saying, okay, it's just the fact that there's not enough good collateral. I think that's definitely an issue. But I also think they're looking at that counterparty and saying, yeah, I don't want to lend to that person, or to that entity. Call it Deutsche Bank, call it HSBC, whatever. And another thing that most people don't realize, even a lot of pros don't realize, is that although we call it a repurchase agreement, and back in the day, it was something where legally that entity would buy the collateral and then you would agree to buy it back. So it technically wasn't like an overnight loan or it's a collateralized loan, but they actually changed the law. It went to, Snyder points this out, that it went to, I don't know if it was the Supreme Court or what happened, but so now it's really not a legal transaction. And to make it worse, the collateral doesn't change hands. Okay, so let's say you and I are two banks.
Yeah.
And you say, you come into the repo market and say, okay, I need to borrow $1 billion for overnight.
Yeah.
Okay. And I say, okay, great. What type of, what do you have for me? And you've got your treasury there. And I say, okay, well, here's the money. Well, what used to happen way back, what most people think is that treasury goes from you to me. So if you default on that loan, well, I've got your treasury, I can sell it out more. No, that's not what happens. It stays with you. So all I'm doing is basically giving you the money. So if you go bust, I most likely won't get that treasury. To add fuel to the fire, that treasury that you're putting up as collateral could be rehypothecated.
So many times, yeah.
So it could be someone else's treasury that you're putting up as collateral that you don't even give to me, that I don't have any legal right to.
Yeah.
So is it any surprise that we see less lending in the repo market when you could potentially have all this counterparty risk? Then you combine that with the fact that there's a lot less collateral that people or entities see as acceptable. And you got a powder keg, it's not good.
So the interconnectedness of this corrupt banking system and all the practices they put in place that pretty much drain society.
Yeah,
they can't contain it no more.
That's coming home to roost.
They can't contain it, like, because they don't trust themselves. Like, it's bad when you don't trust your fellow banker.
Yeah,
and so that's dangerous.
Yeah,
that's very dangerous.
Yeah, what is it? The honesty among thieves. that's no longer.
So here's a question here. So once again, this is like a chat but talk. So I got questions. So I'm learning myself. So here's something that says, "Hey George, is the rate?" This is back when we're talking about the repo rates.
Sure.
Hey George, if the rate got up to 10%, doesn't that imply the real rate it should be at, given the manipulation, and therefore the 10-year treasury to be closer to 17%?
That's right. I don't know if it's closer to 17, but you're absolutely spot on. In fact, I don't know if Paul, if you maybe have seen one of my videos, but if you go to the video that I did, that my channel is just my name, George Gammon, Gammon. I did a video, I believe it was the one that came out Friday, where I actually walked through that. And Luke Groman walks through that as well. It's not just me saying that. I did an interview, and I used clips of our interview, or my interview with Groman. And he says that exact same thing, that it's not just that tenure would adjust, it's mortgages would adjust. Every single interest rate out there would be up right at or above 10%.
Yeah. That goes back to my point about LIBOR, that coming to an end, and that SOFR being the primary mechanism for setting rates amongst the banking sector impacts everything we do as well, because that's just how we, basically borrow ourselves. And so once again, will it work? Will they be able to get that thing off the ground? Because now the Federal Reserve now is the lender and the beginning and end of everything that they're doing in the banking sector. So where do you see the interest rates going? Do you see us going to negative the next year or two? Or getting close to zero, like below 1 and touching on like 0.25% interest rate, period? Like, do you see that coming as a way, or do you see there being some type of other toolkit they can roll out?
Well, are you talking about Fed funds? Or
Fed funds. I mean, that's all interconnected with this repo madness.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to go to zero at some point in time, because if you look at if you put yourself in the shoes of a central banker and kind of try to think like they think, they actually believe that in order to prevent or smooth out a recession, you've got to drop interest rates by 500 basis points. So that's 5%.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have the greatest economy in the world, according to Donald Trump's Twitter feed, and you're at 1.5%, well, where are you going to get your 500 basis points from? So I think the question, like Rick Rule says, it's not an if question, it's a when question. Because when we get to the next recession, there is no way that interest rates, especially the Fed funds, would be at 5% in order to go down to zero.
Yeah.
So if it's not at 5%, and they have to lower, in their minds, they have to lower down 500 basis points, then that takes you into negative. And if they can't go negative, then what will happen is they'll just print enough money to try to make up the difference. So if they can only go down 150 basis points, they'll just plug into their models, okay, how much money do we have to print in order to get the same type of stimulant on the demand side, because they're all Keynesians.
Yeah.
That we would get from lowering the Fed funds another 350 basis points.
Yeah. So that's going to be interesting to see, because it's in our cards. It's one of the things that it's unavoidable. So it's one of them, you can have wishful thinking, and so my thing is, a lot of people can hear this. This spells problems for your current financial dealings, as well as anything you say you're setting aside for a rainy day. Just a very narrative of compound and interest. Like, that was a really big selling point for prior generations, that you put something, you park it here, and they'll take care of it, and it'll grow. In 20, 30 years, you'll be able to withdraw and live happily ever after. How many do you think there's going to be a lot of happily ever afters for the majority of the population that don't get a hold of this information?
No, not at all. And the reason I say that is not just to be doom and gloom or conspiratorial. It's because there's no free lunch. And if you take things down to its very simplest form, purchasing power is productivity. It's not money. It's not currency, especially not currency. It's your productivity. So if there's no consumption without production, okay, you look at how much the United States has overconsumed beyond their ability to produce, especially since 1971, since we left the gold standard. And we went on this fiat currency. And because we had the privilege of the world reserve currency, we've been able to keep our interest rates so low. Think about all the consumption that we've had. I mean, the United States doesn't produce anything, relatively speaking. Right? Look at our budget deficit. So you walk down the aisles of Target or Walmart, And how much of that stuff is produced in the United States? Almost zero,
Yeah.
right? So all of our, well, I'm not going to say all, but or another thought experiment would be, okay, let's just say that you took interest rates up to 10%, like they are here in Colombia for like a mortgage.
Yeah.
Think about what would happen to the United States if interest rates are at 10%. I mean, think what would happen to housing. Think what would happen to the stock market, the corporate bond market. I mean, think about how much money people would lose in the sovereign debt market. I mean, it would be complete. It would be chaos. It would be catastrophic. There are no adjectives to describe how bad that would be. So my point is that whatever the level of the U.S. economy would be at, let's say, 10% interest rates, that's actually that's where it should be based on its production.
Yeah.
So at some point, the gap or the delta between the level of production of the society as a whole and its level of consumption, at some point there's got to be there, right? So if you've had past generations for the last 40 years overconsumed by this much, that means in the future, those generations are going to have to underconsume by that much, or technically, or if we get lucky, maybe it's going to be in equilibrium. So there's really no, I don't see a way long-term that the standard of living in the United States doesn't deteriorate. And I'm not saying that we're all living in huts and it's a third world country. And I'm not saying that at all, because we do have an incredible infrastructure and we do have a lot of human capital. We've got a lot of, there's a lot of good things there that don't go away, even in a worst case scenario. We're still gonna have the roads, we're still gonna, and that's a huge, huge benefit. So you can rebuild, but I just don't see the standard of living. I see this gradually declining until.
I think people will be forced to go back to just the basics of what they need. That's gonna be the primary focus. Like, as opposed to having excess, because you can finance excess right now pretty good.
Yeah.
Everybody gets new iPhones. You can finance a phone. You can finance your whole lifestyle now. You remove the access to credit as easy as it is now, and you'll find out whatever you can afford now with probably cash or a savings or lack thereof is what your living standard might be.
I think that's the easiest way to look at it.
Yeah.
Just look at a country where there's no credit. So just go to Colombia. Look around outside. That's what the United States should look like. Go to, or any country that you guys go to, like a Mexico, that's basically what the United States would look like if we wouldn't have had the, well, I shouldn't say that, because if we wouldn't have had the reserve currency, we probably would have had to do what it takes to increase our productivity. We
probably would still be making stuff at home.
Yeah, it would probably be a lot better. Our economy would probably be far more healthy. So I'm not going to say we look like Mexico, but if it went from, if our level of consumption immediately dropped down to our level of productivity, then you probably would look like Mexico.
Yeah. So getting back to just the basics is what we're talking about here. Like, yeah. So here in this country, one thing I noticed, or just travel in general, people, it's more family centered, more community centered. It's less about getting the bells and whistles, all the gadgets and things. And so that's one thing that we lack in the U.S., which is a big distinction from here and there, because here it's about community, family. Like, everybody, I know it without even having to see it directly in this neighborhood here. But at home, it's every man for themselves. It's cutthroat competition. Everybody want to outdo each other. And I'm not sure if that's the bad narrative of the capitalism concept or what, but it's like every man for himself.
I think it's the opposite.
Sink or swim.
Yeah, I think it's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
I think that, and I think capitalism is the greatest thing we've got going. It's not perfect, but it's better than everything else.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But I see it as the problem really being the welfare state. So, and what I mean by that is, in the United States, if I won't go into the details, but if you have
cars cost 30,000, 50,000 easily. So whatever, that's sidetrack. We'll go ahead. Sorry.
And, so if you have this welfare state where everyone has a backup plan, so you don't really need family because you've got the government.
Yeah,
Right.
so the government substituted the need for family. They removed even when it comes to religion, like, giving churches a credit, keeping them from actually getting into the communities. Like I've heard some churches where situations where the government won't allow churches to do certain things for the homeless in California. Like I think churches, the ideal infrastructure for a church is to get in the community and to help.
Absolutely.
And so once again, if there's, if they're being discouraged to do that because of them, I think it's I heard about a bill or law being brought before whatever county, whatever, to remove that 501(c) opportunity if churches open up their doors to the homeless.
Yeah,
like that's
it's
like,
insane.
Like, come on now,
it's completely insane. And so the government has taken over that role in the U.S. If you're if you're a single gal with 3 kids or whatever, you can go to the government and get some form of subsidy there, right? Where if you're in Colombia and you're a single gal or a single guy with the 3 kids, you're not going to the government, you're going to the street. So what's your option? Of course, it's going to be family. That's why that's one of the reasons why families are so close knit here, and you rely on your family. That is the welfare, is the family and the church. Where in the United States and in all these other countries, your safety net isn't your family, it's not the church, it's the state. And that in my opinion is not good at all. So I would much prefer to trust in my family than those politicians we were talking about earlier that are as shady as shady can be.
Do you follow? So it's almost an hour, so everybody get a dial back. Won't take up the rest of the day. Are you following the impeachment? Or actually, I'm sorry to ask the questions. I'm gonna just get to here because I gotta ask all the questions. But you guys got any thoughts about the dial back? And
by the way, Patriot, I see him or her on all my live streams. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you being on the live streams as well. It's really, the support's great.
Yeah. So here's a question here from Marcel off Periscope. He says, how about entertainment and advertising? Tell us how to live and what we need. So once again, it's according to what you want out of life, in my personal opinion. So there's no right or wrong. It's more so if you know everything around you is about to come to a correction, and there's going to come, with that correction will come a lot of pain, but then also, depending on your perspective, it's going to be a lot of opportunity. So it's more so your paradigm at this current point. How do you see the world? If you see the world as a struggle, anticipate more struggle. If you see it as opportunity, stuff might be crumbling around you, but there's still going to be some jewels around that you can still get a hold of, I think. So that'll be a way of just solving that, because there's no go get there's no one answer for this life-altering experience that's underway right now. So that's not 2 cents.
Yeah, I can't, everyone's an individual and they make their own decisions. I'm not sure, Marcel, what you exactly need, but let me tell you a story. Let's see, when was this? This was right after I retired, so it would have been 2012. I had a place in the golf course in Vegas, and back then I used to make a substantial amount of money. So as a single guy, so I had all this artwork, and I had all the latest audio, visual, TVs and all this stuff that you imagine, and all these fancy watches and just all that stuff. And I remember I just had all this stuff, and every single time you move, it's just such a pain in the ass, and you got to do all this. And I thought to myself, I'm just going to put all this stuff in storage and just keep kind of just the basic stuff that makes it just 10 times easier. And then I went on a trip, and I can't remember where I went, but I left for about a month where I did a lot of traveling. And so it's just completely outside of mind. And I came back from that trip, and I opened up my door, everything was gone. And the first couple seconds, I thought that I actually put it in storage and forgot that I put it in storage. But as it didn't, it
So
dawned on
you opened
me.
the door of your residence and saw everything gone. And forgot that it was in storage.
No. That's what I thought. I thought, did I put that in storage? Man, my memory's getting bad. And then it dawned on me that I actually got robbed.
Damn.
And they just stole everything that I had.
Yeah.
They even stole the bed. I mean, they stole all my expensive watches and all that.
That's not funny, but damn.
But the point that I'm making to Marcel is that after about 30 seconds of thinking about it, I was like, you know what? That's awesome. That is fantastic because I was just going to put it in storage anyway. They saved me a trip, and now I don't even have to pay the $200 in storage a month. And ever since then, I've just really, I mean, you could take this this laptop and go in my closet here, and you guys will see that I really don't have more stuff than I could fit in maybe 3 suitcases.
Yeah.
And since I've lived that way, oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, no doubt. It's simple, but it's effective because it keeps you with bare minimum. So your risk to the emotional attachment of losing a lot of things now is relatively smaller than I imagine that initial shock when you open your door, and just a shock of like, because somebody takes from you, that's personal. And I'm assuming there's emotional attachments to some items in there that probably came from family, friends. So to chime into this more, the less dependent you are on outside possessions and whatnot, that can also alleviate some of that pain.
Yeah.
So if there's no particular item that you're fond of, and if it's gone, then it'll hurt. But if it's nothing in particular that you've become so attached to that you absolutely need, that'll lessen the pain for what's currently going on, I believe.
Yeah, and you have so much more freedom and flexibility. Like if I wanted to go spend 6 months in South Africa or Croatia, a place where I really like spending time, it's easy. Just I could literally pack in an hour, go to the airport, and spend 6 months there, and you don't even have to worry about it. And so it goes from having a lot of material things to really just placing a higher emphasis on flexibility, freedom, and then actual experiences of seeing things out in the world, becoming a better person, and meeting more people.
Yeah.
And I prefer that. Now, is that right for everyone? Probably not, but that's what I prefer.
Okay, I would agree with you. I would disagree with you. I'm sorry. I believe everyone needs to. And this goes to the other channel, Giftpreneurs. I'm started whatever. Where a part of me coming here was also to connect. There's opportunity everywhere I go because I look for ways to create opportunity for myself as well as add value to other people. And so a part of this is I'm getting a new experience. New experiences expands your awareness. Your awareness is expanded. You want bigger and greater.
Yeah.
Problem is, in the U.S., especially as the big brother government, as you mentioned earlier, as that grows, they put such a hold on your life to where you're now chasing $1 for the bare minimum or whatever that standard is for yourself, that you get emotionally attached, trapping yourself into that system and not looking for experiences. I believe life, this is just me speaking, coming from the sports world, my greatest and most fondest memories are the experiences I've had with my teammates and going into foreign lands, walking down the street where I don't know where I'm going. That's priceless to me. So anyway, I'm gonna start preaching, but let's get it down back. You ready? We'll dial this back because we can go forever. So I'm enjoying myself. But
and thanks for being here, guys. It looks like is that how many people?
We got 96 so far.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to spend some time with us.
Yeah, exactly. So if you've enjoyed the back and forth, don't be afraid to donate a thumbs up beneath this video. Or if you didn't like it, thumbs down. I welcome both. Whatever works for you. Like I mentioned last night, I don't care. I can't say I don't care. But I'm at a point where I've been preaching this and saying this similar subject matter for so long. Yeah. I want to talk about new experiences. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm like, whatever you want to do it. But I enjoy hanging out with everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. And thank you for welcoming me in your home and things like that. So that being the case, back at it again. Got a couple more vlogs I'm going to put out there. But other than that, leave a comment down below and I'll try to get some questions or shoot them to George, have them answer, whatever, before time moves on. But be blessed and safe. See you guys later. Peace.